So you might have noticed that last week I wasn't able to complete a video at the time that I usually do, unfortunately. This was due to three things in total. One, my father and I got out to a model railroad swap meet this weekend. That was a lot of fun, but it meant that some of my free time was eaten up. Two, final season is going on, and I have to finish up a 30-page story, which I'm currently quite proud of, but I still have to do some revisions before turning in the final rendition. And third, last but not least, was this. I've been working on some maps and testing out this new game mode as much as I can. While these are all great fun and great accomplishments, they have the unfortunate side effect of me being unable to complete videos in a timely manner. Fortunately, things are starting to tone down a little bit, and hopefully I can get you more videos more consistently. And don't worry, I am still going to do the thumbnail video that I promised in the Discord. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and there have been a few new entrants since I first started work on it, so I might restart that at a later time. It might be a couple of weeks or even a month until I actually do that, though. Sorry for the delay, but thank you for your patience. Speaking of videos though, the audio in this one got kind of messed up, so if you like hearing the notification noises of Railroad, sorry, they're not in the background of this one. I tried to fix the recording several times and it didn't work. Sorry folks. Anyways, the next big update was announced yesterday. I thought I'd help with that hype train, pun fully intended, and post a video about Rush Hour myself. After all, I've been designing maps for it for a while now, so I know this mode rather well. I could give you people some tips on how to play it better, but I think at this point in time, it's best to give you all tips on how to build better maps. After all, when the update goes public, there's bound to be a ton of people who want to mess around with the mode who will have no clue what they're doing, and we're going to get a bulk of bad maps. Giving you people a few small hints on how to do things right might help mitigate that problem a little bit. So how about we dive into a few lessons that I've learned while building this level. The first comparison you might make to this game mode is Endless. While Rush Hour plays out more like Timetable with this arcadey style and feeling, the player unlocks new stations over time, builds track, and accepts new contracts, just like Endless. Sure, you don't really have much of a choice on what contracts you do accept, but they're all procedurally generated. So with that in mind, you might think at first that it's best to build one of these maps like an Endless map. And while that is true, you want to exercise similar design principle when building these maps, you don't want to exercise identical design principles. Firstly, and probably most obviously, you don't actually want to have a starting area. Because the maps start with two randomly chosen stations, it might not be consistent where the player starts, and therefore you shouldn't be the one laying the track, but they should be. Of course, there are tools that limit what stations can be among those starting two stations, but unless you limit it to exactly two starting stations, there is no guaranteed way to make sure that your starting area will be the starting area. And besides, the game will act as if the player doesn't have the connection and give them the appropriate amount of tracks to make the connection that they already have. This might be a useful leg up in some more difficult maps that need these extra tracks, but in general you should be limiting the difficulty through other means. That's not to say that a starting area is completely worthless, but for the most part it is, and you should probably avoid adding starting trackage. The other big change, and probably by far the biggest one, is that you actually want your stations to be bypassable. You see, in Endless, bypassable stations allow people to break and ignore commuter contracts. Commuter trains have access to cabs on both ends, which is a massive benefit. In order to keep them balanced, they don't go so fast and are required to stop at every station. But if you can just skip a station completely, then what's the point? But the problem is, that mindset works for Endless, but it doesn't work for Rush Hour. because commuter trains don't work that way in rush hour. Instead of creating a contract based on the probability per station, the game decides contracts based on predetermined contracts that the map creator puts into their level. If a commuter train wants to follow a certain route and stop at every stop, it's going to do that. But that's not why bypass tracks are actually preferable in rush hour. It's just why they are acceptable. The reason they're preferable is because you don't have any control over what stations unlock in what order. If a freight train spawns from one border to another that needs to go through 3 stations to make it to its destination, you had better hope those 3 stations were previously unlocked. Because if the game doesn't automatically unlock them, you can't use them. And that's why bypass tracks are actually a good thing in this mode. If a train spawns that needs to go through multiple stations to get to its destination, stations which it does not have on its timetable and therefore are not unlocked, a bypass track allows the train to actually reach its destination. And if it can't reach its destination, you can't complete the wave. You can't beat the game. So while they suck in Endless, bypass tracks are kind of mandatory in rush hour. But if you're paying attention to this map, there aren't any bypass tracks. Why is that? Well, if you can guarantee that the station is always unlocked, then there's no reason to worry about a bypass track because the station will always be available for the player to use, right? As I mentioned before, there are tools that allow you to limit which stations can and can't be chosen for the first 2 stations the player starts with. If there are only 2 stations that the player can start with, they will always start with those stations. So if either of those 2 stations would normally need a bypass track, now they don't, because you know those tracks are going to be unlocked anyways. This trick is used in Mesa Extension by forcing you to only have Ports Mill and Wakefield unlocked at first, meaning that Wakefield needs no bypass tracks. The next thing I want to cover is contract generation, because there's this one little thing that I seriously messed up when I first started editing maps, and I figure it's kind of important and that everyone should know about it. That is the difference between occurrence and onset duration. You see, when I first started building, I thought that occurrence was the maximum amount of trains that can spawn throughout all 10 of these waves, and that onset duration was how long of a period these trains could spawn over every wave. Not the train enter timeout, no, just a period of time that trains could spawn over. Since at this point I assumed that occurrence was how many times the train would appear, the onset duration would be how many waves would occur. I thought that because more waves occurred over a longer period of time with the same amount of trains, this would lower the difficulty. However, that was under the assumption that the occurrence factor was a strict number that told you how many trains would spawn per round. This was false. The occurrence factor is the chance that a train has to spawn every round. The more waves that you cause by an increased onset duration, the more chances there are for more trains to spawn. Because of this misunderstanding, Mesa Extension got insane on Wave 8. And by insane, I mean 20 trains were trying to spawn, all at once. Yeah, we nerfed that, and I'm very glad we did. This map is actually possible now, as you can see in the background. Just make sure you don't make my same mistake, alright? Alright, we've reached the part of the video where I don't really have much more to say on level design. I've kind of told you all that currently I know. Obviously I'll learn more in the future, but there are a few fun little details that I thought I'd point out here. For instance, some of you might have noticed this is based on the first timetable map, Wakefield. In that map, Josek mentions a bakery, And the idea was that that bakery has gone into overdrive. It's become a much, much bigger bakery than before, and it needs a workforce. The workforce is actually already in place, but the transportation network is not. They need to get to and from their houses, after all. Because of this rise in demand, and a sponsorship from the bakery, you've been tasked with making the new rail network in the area. You might run into a couple of budgetary issues, and the expectations from the bakery are a bit high, but we're sure you can make it through this. Well, at least, we would be sure if that plan was actually put in place. Sadly, this isn't actually an official idea. It was just my own, and I never actually proposed it to any of the developers. Maybe I should have. But if you've been paying attention, you can see that they already added their own idea and their own character to this mode. Milosh has been talking, even if he's been muted due to my sound issues that I mentioned earlier, and he's going to be the head of this game mode. I like Milosh's character. I also like his voice. I don't like the fact that there's no way to disable it, however, without disabling all other sounds. You have no idea how many times I've had to listen to him while play testing. It's gotten a little bit tiring. But I think his character holds a lot of promise, and I'm excited to see where it goes. Maybe I'll even be able to help write some lines. After all, I am working on being a creative writer. No promises, though. We'll see how that goes. Anyways, that's all I have to share with you today. Now we can all sit back, relax, and watch me beat this mode in silence. Hold on, let me put on a little music, just for fun. But this is all the talking you're gonna get today, so I guess, cheers, folks. See you in the next one. Oh, and by the way, did I say that I was going to win? Well, psych. I lied.